Good morning or afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the Airport Rental Car Supplier Diversity Outreach Day National Webinar. As we are going to allow a few people into the room, and we will get the program started shortly with opening remarks. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning for the Airport Rental Car Supplier Diversity Outreach Day. We're going to kick off this morning's program with opening remarks from Ebony Wimbush, President and CEO of the Airport Minority Advisory Council. Ebony?
Hello, my name is Ebony Wimbush, the new President and CEO of AMAC, Airport Minority Advisory Council. On behalf of AMAC's National Office and Leadership Team, I want to welcome you to the 2022 Airport Rental Car Supplier Diversity Outreach Webinar as we discuss the past, present, and most importantly, the future of airport rental car concessions. As the only national nonprofit association dedicated to advancing the full participation of minorities and women in employment and contracting opportunities throughout the aviation industry, I'm delighted to partner with over 60 airports, rental car companies, and our federal government partners at the FAA and the U.S. Department of Transportation, who recently published their Equity Action Plan, highlighting the 4 focus areas to guide equity advancement, including wealth creation. For more than 38 years, AMAC has and continues to diligently work on behalf of our diverse membership through advocacy efforts, critical programming, and vast networking opportunities to position our members to receive equity throughout this transformative time in America's infrastructure. Why do we do it? Not just because airports who accept funds from the FAA administered financial grants are required to develop, implement, and enforce ACDBE and DBE programs that level the playing field for disadvantaged businesses, but because airports are centers of employment and generators of significant economic activity in their communities. Diverse businesses are significant contributors to economic sustainability of their communities, and research shows that entrepreneurship is one of the keys closing the racial wealth gap. So after this webinar, I invite you and encourage you to learn more about AMAC. I encourage you to join or renew your membership and participate in upcoming activities, including our annual Business Diversity Conference, which takes place this year on June 20th through 23rd in Chicago, hosted by the Chicago Department of Aviation. So without further delay, I want to turn it over to Raymond Christie and Yolanda Woodruff, and also thank them for their leadership in ensuring that this important conversation continues on an annual basis. Raymond?
Everybody for a wonderful introduction. We are glad to be here. Yolanda, I know you're glad to be here. You're in the host city for AMAC's Business Diversity Conference this summer. So let's get this thing started because this is one of the roads, get it? One of the roads to AMAC. Before we get started, because we have a lot of things to cover and there's a lot of good information out there that we want to definitely touch on. But one of the things I wanted to make sure that we touch on is what is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program? What is a DBE? In all the years that I've been doing as a DBLO liaison officer, as well as being a certifier, folks have always asked me, what is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program? Well, what is a DBE? And a DBE is a small business. And I know there's a lot of small businesses that are tuning in today to this program. Now, folks have also said to me, well, I'm not disadvantaged. And I've always come back and said, hey, a rose by any other name is still a rose. Finally, to me, what does the DBE program do? Well, quite frankly, in short order, the DBE program takes the catch out of a catch-22. Everyone out there knows you can't get any jobs if you don't have any experience, and you can't get any experience if you don't have any jobs. So the DBE program does just that. It takes that catch out of the catch-22. So today's topic and today's panel is very interesting. They bring very unique, but a wealth of information to our topics. So let's go ahead and get started in introducing our guest, Yolanda. Will you help me?
Sure, sounds good. So first, we have the Honorable Bob Ashby, who is the former Deputy Secretary, former Deputy General Counsel for the U.S. Department of Transportation. And he is also the co-author of 49 CFR Part 26 and Part 23. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure you're full of historical information as well as information that will take us well into the future. Raymond?
I'd like to introduce Shelby Scales. Shelby Scales is the director, as they call it, Director Scales, over at the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, commonly referred to as OSDBU. Shelby has a wealth of information, a wealth of background and experience in advocating for small businesses, especially when it comes to working with government programs, whether it's in the state where she's from, the state of North Carolina, because she was the director of, and the former director of the Office of Civil Rights with North Carolina Department of Transportation, as well as where she is now at the director of OSDBU. Welcome, Shelby. Yolanda?
All right. Yeah, next there is Gene Roth. Gene Roth is someone who has tackled the environment in many industries, but it's still aviation related. He has been a part of the rental car industry. He has been the executive director for AMAC, as well as currently serving us in the FAA as the Chief of External Operations. Now, prior to joining the FAA, he did do all of those things, believe it or not. So he is also going to provide us with a wealth of information, not only of the RAC industry, not only of AMAC and the diversity and inclusion and equity, but he's also going to give us some insights as to what's going on currently in the FAA arena. So thank you so much, Gene, for joining us.
And those are our wonderful federal partners, but here are some of our rental partners that make this happen. Coming all the way live from Parsippany, I always have to practice that, Parsippany, New Jersey. We have Mike Robotasio, who is the director, he is the director of procurement on the global level for Avis Renekart. He has nearly 10 years of working, and I should have asked the question, what is M&A? So I'll let him explain that. But he's been with Avis Budget Group for nearly 10 years. And he has experience in strategic sourcing, procurement, and supplier diversity efforts for the last year at Avis Budget Group. Welcome, Mike.
Right. And
Thanks, Raymond.
next we also have Dwayne Norris. He is with Enterprise Holdings, and he serves as the manager of the supply chain. So he is pretty prominent in the area of how to promote corporate supplier diversity in Enterprise Holdings. He's originally from Brooklyn. Welcome, New Yorker. He has been with Enterprise for over 17 years, and he has served on the Enterprise Holdings DE&I team for the last 4 years. Thank you so much for joining us.
Next, and definitely last, but not necessarily the best of the best of the best. Sorry, I messed it up, so I got to cover it up some way. We have Maria Brooks, who is the Regional Procurement Director for Hertz Renekart. and the various brands that come along with Hertz. She has started her career at Hertz back in '89 and was the region's maintenance department clerk in 1989. She has been, she's famous for her get in and get it done, working at the grassroots level of making things happen. As well as she's very proud of the fact that through her relentless actions to recruiting DBE suppliers, helping them understand the corporate purchasing practices and procedures, and allowing the other regions of Hertz to access identified DBEs through Hertz's automated catalog system. Welcome and good morning, Maria. I'm glad that you are here. So I'm going to turn it over to Yolanda, and let's have a conversation, Yolanda, with our panelists.
All right, so I want to start with our resident historian, Bob Ashby. So, putting together Part 26 and Part 23, how did that all come together? Tell us a little bit about what happened along the way in getting all of those regulations related so that we could utilize them within our industry. Bob, you're muted. We would love to hear you.
Okay, there we are. My actual title when I was at DOT was Deputy Assistant General Counsel for Regulation and Enforcement, 8 words, which is Exhibit A for the proposition that the length of one's title is inversely proportional to one's actual importance. At any rate, where we start here is really going back to Congress. Originally, the DBE program in any form did not apply to FAA. It applied to highway and transit starting in 1982. So 1987, FAA reauthorization, Cardis Collins, Congresswoman from Illinois, proposed an amendment, a floor amendment, that would add the DBE program to the AIP program. And Norm Mineta made a floor statement supporting it, and no less than Newt Gingrich from the Republican side said, no problem for us. That did not include car rentals. The underlying bill, however, never got out of conference. So a few months later, after some negotiations that explicitly included ACRA, Hertz, ACI, AAAE, and AMAC, but with no legislative history whatsoever on the record, a car rental provision emerged as part of the FAA DBE provision in that bill, which did pass. But seldom has such a fairly significant piece of legislation passed with so little legislative history. I think I compiled probably the only extant legislative history, and it's not very long. Now, and then, by the way, there was a 1992 colloquy between a couple of senators supporting allowing car rental companies to include costs of purchasing cars from the certified DBE dealers. A few problems were created this way. One of which is, and they didn't know it at the time, but it's become important since, after the series of court decisions like Adirond, there has never been a congressional finding of compelling need for the car rental DBE program, or really even the FAA DBE program in general. This means that more so than the FTA, FHWA portion of the program, that means the FAA program in general and the car rental program in particular is more subject to constitutional challenge than the highway and transit. And fortunately, there's never been a constitutional challenge. I speculate that that's because of cultural differences between the industry. I mean, you go to a highway association meeting and people, 40 years after the fact are still really up in arms about this DBE program. You go to an AMAC meeting, everybody has a party together. It's a very different cultural world. But nevertheless, that is something to keep in mind. This is vulnerable on one of the main prongs of constitutional law, vulnerable. Second thing is, those of us in DOT, as we were putting together the original Part 23 regulations, you have this picture in our minds, and I think perhaps Representatives Mineta and Collins did as well, that what we were dealing with was a situation where airports had a bunch of rental spaces on their concourses, and independent local DBE businesses would get some of those leases. And you'd have, a local independent DBE, ACDBE, who would be filling that slot in the concourse. Well, that picture of the airport world may or may not have been true then. I'm not sure that it was, but it certainly is not true now. When airport rental spaces are the sort of last surviving outpost of the shopping mall culture, franchises of national brands. And that has meant that instead of local independent businesses that we pictured coming into airports, we have a reliance on joint venture agreements and supplies and services. And in some ways that's good. In some ways it's led to at least what I consider to be some distortions. I mean, there are some absolutely beautiful JV agreements out there. I mean, models of draftsmanship that result in not a lot of control by DBEs of the operations of the joint ventures in which they participate. So they may be kind of investment vehicle, but they're certainly not what we considered ownership and control in the, I guess, old-fashioned sense.
Now, Bob, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that kind of leads me into the next question of, did you envision concession opportunities developing into its current format?
No.
In the way that these business opportunities have come about for ACDBE?
No, we did not anticipate that. So, there have been difficulties in adjustment to the newer reality. I mean, one of the things about the ACDBE program in general, and this is probably even more true in the car rental area than in general, is that because it was kind of modeled on the federally assisted contracts DBE program setup, in Part 26, what we have with the ACDBE program, in my view, is a kind of classic square peg round hole program. We have, we're trying to fit the concessions business model in which people rent a space for an airport and run their business into the federally assisted contracts DBE model like we have in AIP, and it's not a good match. It creates all kinds of difficulties in program implementations that I'm sure Gene has had plenty of experience with.
Is that why we see some current notices of proposed rulemaking on the docket?
Well, Gene again knows, because I'm outside the department these days. I'm not privy to what's going on. I know there's an NPRM currently in process, hasn't popped yet, that will get to some issues. I don't know to what extent that will affect Part 23 as well as Part 26. I mean, one of the things, folks like Wilbur Barham and Marcus England have put in a lot of really good work over the years with stakeholder meetings, with white papers and guidance that are essentially an attempt, as I see it, to kind of round off some of the corners of that square peg in the round hole. Good work, really put in a lot of effort on it. I'm not sure it's capable of addressing what I consider a basic underlying structural issue in the program. So,
okay.
Quick question for
Yeah.
Shelby, because Shelby was around. Shelby and Gene have been around, and I'm going to even say Maria, based on her resume, have been around to see how what wasn't really formed and structured and what it turned into. So what Bob has just said, Shelby and Maria, what has been your experience with what has been created from what Bob and company created through this writing of the regulation?
So I will say, going back to my earlier days as a DBLO at an airport, it was very difficult for us to really find substantial participation, particularly for DBEs in the rental car industry, because the majority of the purchasing or procurement was from the fleet, right? And so in terms of how the regs would allow us to count participation versus someone just, for example, we would have oftentimes DVEs that would transport the vehicles to the local stations and get, partial credit for that, that transmission. We really didn't count that as being substantial in terms of building growth and providing opportunities for that minority firm to participate. So I would agree with Bob's assessment that there was some structural challenges there as a DBLO early on in those days, trying to fit small businesses into an industry practice that really didn't lend itself for substantial participation. And we tried a number of things, which I'll talk about as we go on in the conversation, in terms of trying to get the rental cars to consider other local procurement purchases. But we also found that those local purchases were very insignificant when you benchmark those against the fleet purchases. So, trying to balance the procurement process with how the industry, runs its business, I think had some challenges with, how the program was laid out and how you were allowed to get participation early on in those days. So that's my recollection. And I'm not that old, by the way, Raymond, so.
Well, okay, then let's talk to some folks that are a little bit younger, like Mike and Dwayne. How have you seen the success or challenges? What are some of the successes that you've seen? What are some of the opportunities that you feel are out there for those ACDB firms working with their rental car partners at those local airports?
Sure, I'll go. Some of the successes, minority and underserved businesses can interact and build relationships with larger companies, giving them the opportunity to scale their business and create more long-term partnerships with other larger companies. So that's really the biggest opportunity that we see from having a program and what, how we can help the smaller companies.
Yeah, I agree with Dwayne. The program keeps this top of mind for us as we contract services locally, and it gives us kind of a unified voice in the field to say these are the type of companies we'd like to do business with, and the program gives us the guardrails to do that properly.
Are there some specific areas that you guys have seen opportunities for firms to jump in, or have you identified certain areas that are available for small businesses to seek opportunities with rental car companies at the local level?
Yeah, I think having outreach events like this create opportunities where we can get suppliers to congregate with us, and and people like us to kind of join them together with the decision makers at our companies to get them to get bids for the work that we have. In particular, there's opportunities for auto detailer positions and people that move the cars for us, positions like that, security positions, things like that, more specifically in the QTA operations. So those bring out opportunities as well. Like was mentioned, some of the smaller things, they don't add up as much, but in those particular areas like, auto detailers and car movers, that's where you kind of get more bang for your buck.
I agree. I would like to see there be bigger opportunities as well, right? I'm sure Dwayne would agree, right? So the auto detailing and moving of cars turns out to be pretty big ticket items in a lot of cases. What would be nice would be if we could scale some of these things nationally instead of having it be one airport at a time, over and over, rinse and repeat. And we've talked previously about reciprocity for certifications that would enable these businesses to scale nationally and really increase the addressable market for them to grow their businesses.
Well, I'm gonna leave reciprocity up to Gene because that's a very lengthy conversation. But from an airport standpoint, for example, at my airport in Salt Lake City, some of the things that we've seen other than fleet, which is a big chunk, well, could be a chunk, but auto body repair, auto transport, windshield repair and replacement. Those have been some key factors that even security has even been another opportunity. What are some of the other opportunities that are out there? And we lost, where's Maria? Did we lose Maria?
It looks like we did.
Okay, well, maybe she's
Hopefully she can jump back on. We'd love her input.
Dwayne or Mike, what
Yeah,
have you seen?
I think there's a big opportunity looking forward to in the EV space, electronic vehicles. I think there's a big opportunity coming forth with that. That's going to be the way of the future is electronic vehicles, and for those suppliers that could really jump on with that, as far as supplying the charging stations or the maintenance of those things like that. I think that's an area that we can tap into to generate more business for small businesses.
Now, if I could piggyback off of what you were just saying, Dwayne, with electric vehicles, right? So are there any other signs of market disruptions or disruptors to the traditional rental car industry? And do you actually foresee the retirement of certain NAICS codes or certain providers of goods and services becoming obsolete? And do you see some coming to the forefront?
When I think of services that are becoming obsolete, the first thing that comes to mind is GPSs. GPSs used to be a huge generator for us back when you had the TomToms and such devices, but nowadays with the smartphones and the evolution of those and the GPS systems that are built into cars, that space has kind of depleted for GPS systems. So that's one that comes to mind first off.
And Michael, anything to add to that?
So in terms of new disruptors, I think Dwayne hit it on the head with EV. It's not gonna make anything obsolete, but it might reduce the amount of money that's spent on things like oil changes, obviously, right, as you move towards more battery operated vehicles. But it's gonna open up completely new areas of spending, like battery maintenance, battery replacement. It's going to create more opportunity for tire vendors, because of the weight of the batteries. You're going to go through tires way faster. So there's going to be a lot of things that come out of EV, including electrical contracting, grid updates, and things like that people haven't even started to think about. And right now, every airport's kind of approaching it individually, right, and differently. So I think you're going to see it slowly sweep across the U.S. as EV adoption grows.
Now, Raymond, you had some real good takes on electronic vehicles and the future of rental car companies.
Well, yeah,
care to share?
Yeah, it just seems like we've gone from, at one point, we were Fred Flintstone and Barney Rubble with our feet through the floor, breaking and starting and what have you. And then the other side of the coin, there's George Jetson in these flying vehicles that are electric. So, where are we in between Fred, Barney, and Fred and Barney and George Jetson in regards to, with now looking at electric vehicles, but also what's going to be the impact on airports and airports infrastructure on the amount of electrical capacity that they're going to need. And Gene, from a compliance standpoint, is that going to be any impact on the regulations that now electric vehicles are now the new charge of the future?
I don't think that's going to impact the DBE or ACDB regulations, certainly, and concessions are not federally funded typically. So I think that the charging stations and the need for all that will certainly come from the suppliers to car rental companies, and not from the airports per se, because they won't pay for it.
I know, Mike, we had an interesting conversation about the level 2 chargers and level 3 chargers. Is that an opportunity for ACDB firms?
I think so, right? And it goes back to your question, where are we between George Jetson and the Flintstones? I think we're probably stuck at Homer Simpson somewhere, right? Because we still have regular combustion engines. It's going to be a while before the infrastructure is in place. Level 2 chargers now seem to be okay with existing infrastructure, but I think as we move to level 3 charging, it's gonna require some significant upgrades at individual airports. Unless there's airports with brand new contracts that might have the right capacity going in. But it's going to create a lot of opportunity, a lot of work on airport that needs to be done, and probably in a hurry, where DBEs could get involved in a bigger way.
What I've heard a number, I think it's like 100,000 cars are targeted towards going towards the rental car industry for rental. Have you guys heard anything about that?
As far as EV cars?
Yes, EV cars.
I haven't heard that specific number, but I mean, for us, we're embracing the responsibility. We have to transition our fleet to EVs, and we're committed to doing so in a thoughtful way for the benefit of all the stakeholders. Thinking long-term and putting the customer at the center of everything we do has served us well. And, we continue to drive our EV strategy. That's why we're focused on investing in the customer experience and our operations to be able to support our customers as they get into EVs. This includes, ensuring the grid and charging infrastructure are prepared to deliver an outstanding experience. It's different from what we've seen, and we have to also be educated on that. But we're embracing that and ready for the future.
I see Shelby has her hand raised.
Who's Shelby?
Shelby, you're muted.
You may be muted.
Okay, did you unmute me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right, sorry about that. So the host needed to unmute me, but yeah, what I was gonna add is on April the 28th, OSDBU will be hosting with the Department of Energy a small business training on electric vehicle charging stations. So for those who are in the audience that are interested in learning more about our expectations from USDOT, how do you go about engaging in that industry? How do you get permitting? How do you work with teams of local folks such as your permit department and power company, et cetera? We'll be laying out all of that information in a training session on April the 28th. It is not on my website, but I'll make sure that I get that dropped into the chat box while we're talking this morning. But hopefully that we'll see many people on the call today who are interested in electric vehicle charging stations. What is it? How do you get engaged with it? Will show up for April the 28th at our hosted event.
But I have a quick question, and maybe I'll just ask the question. Those airports that are a little bit older, that are also very large, like in the top 10 or the top 20, that don't have an updated electrical grid, what's going to be the challenge, or what's going to be the opportunities for small businesses to help them with this infrastructure challenge for increasing the amount of electricity that is going to be needed for not only a level 2, but as I understand it, a level 3 charger, which charges a vehicle within 2 hours, that gets it up to 80%, so it can be rented back out. So is there opportunities for those older airports that have maybe a challenge to the infrastructure?
Yeah, Raymond, they will be challenged in terms of modernizing their facilities and tapping into those grids, but there'll be some construction opportunities as part of that modernization. We have airports contacting us as we speak in terms of our EV charging station group and our Department of Energy on how best to go about doing that with their local power folks, but also specs from DOT and the Department of Energy. So I would say, yes, there will be some construction related opportunities, but do attend the April 28th, even if you're an airport or you're, Raymond, let your folks know as well, because this workshop is going to be hosted by the folks who put the reference guide together. And they will be talking about specifications, how to go about doing it, and expectations. But I would say my initial answer to that is yes, there will be some construction-related opportunities available.
So Raymond, I think one of the things you'll see is distribution, right? So once the grids are upgraded, you're going to need distribution into the individual areas where rental car companies have their fleet, whether that's, where customers pick up, or QTAs, right, which might be slightly behind the scenes, or even within parking decks. You're going to have distribution of that electricity. You're going to have kind of project management and design opportunities for local firms. You probably also have, like you said, the charging devices themselves, whether it's manufacturing or installation. I think rental car companies, particularly on airport, or a lot of our volumes are going to be probably the biggest consumer of those type of charging devices. And it, like Dwayne said, right, we have a responsibility to help usher in the EV adoption. And I think a lot of people's first experience in an EV might be with a rental car company, because it's the easiest way to try one out for a couple of days or a week and see if range anxiety and charging challenges are really something you're willing to deal with. So we might be the front lines of the EV revolution, I think.
Okay. Before I turn
That
it
is
over,
a great perspective.
before I turn over to Yolanda, I do have to admit, I did some quick research. I did not know that electric cars go back to 1859, the first one, and then the first cartoon Renekart was with Grandma Duck, and on her license plate it said 1902. But the actual electric cars have been around for a very long time, but just in a limited number. But I didn't know that they had been around so long, just like our watches. We're now talking to our watches. Yolanda, I'm sorry, I'm getting off.
No, I love it, because who would have thought that electric vehicles are actually old hat and not something new? So it's almost like, cycles or trends. And now electric vehicles are back in style 100 years later. So it's kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah. So now, we're talking about the electric car, and Michael, you said that rental car agencies may be the conduit for someone who has a little anxiety about utilizing an electric vehicle. So with the changing demographic, how do you really see the rental car business model being impacted? We have a different demographic that's traveling now. We may have those who are looking to just be curious about these electric vehicles, but that may take a while, right? So for now, how do you see the demographic really changing the rental car model?
Well, I think if someone is really a believer in electric vehicles, then you're going to have to offer those vehicles, right? If someone's very an early adopter of electric vehicles, they're not going to necessarily want to drive a traditional combustion engine vehicle. The customer has to be at obviously at the center of the experience. But I think for rental car in particular, it's going to change a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that people don't see. Turning the cars around, getting them ready for the next rental in a timely fashion with charging. Doing roadside service on those type of cars. And, when you have dead batteries and people, maybe it's their first time in an EV, they didn't look at their app or whatever, they don't know where there's a charging station, they're on the side of the road. You have to be prepared for all those things. So I think that's going to be the biggest change for us in the meantime, is going to be behind the scenes.
Do you think that will create jobs, more jobs?
I think so.
Yeah, it sounds like it might actually create more opportunities in areas where we didn't think there would be, because with COVID, we're gonna say it. With COVID, we saw the job market really become depleted with the Great Resignation, or quiet quitting, where people are doing like the bare minimum. So we've seen that change in the workforce. Now, have any of you seen any changes in the workforce that is going to dictate your hiring or your contracting with minority companies?
I mean, at first, the pandemic did, delete jobs, causing a lot of companies to drastically downsize their workforce to account for minimizing expenses with the nationwide and global travel bans that were indefinite. But now that we're, quote unquote, bouncing back from the early effects of the pandemic, the demand for employees is high, and it can be difficult in some markets to fill vacancies. So, with that being said, yeah, there's opportunities there. But I think you're faced with the challenges of people being able to work from home now and not having to do so much manual labor. And I think it's causing people to kind of not take these jobs that are open, that are in high demand. So the pandemic did change it, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity out there. We just got to get creative on bringing prospective employees to the table and bringing prospective businesses to the table.
Right, right. So would an HR company or a hiring company or a headhunter of sorts be a vendor that the rental car companies may utilize in order to increase their pool of candidates?
Sure, I would say absolutely. Absolutely.
Maria, what do you think?
Thank you. I'm sorry. I had low bandwidth and I dropped off, so I had to get back into it. So yes, since it's so hard to get employees, we're having to become creative. But yes, we do have some staffing levels in some smaller markets, that we may need some help that our national accounts may not be able to cover. Electric vehicles has opened up a lot of doors for suppliers that we need to be able to have them certified for certain certain manufacturers, so that way they can be able to work on the cars, be able to fix body damage. So there's plenty of opportunities out there. It's whatever the disadvantaged minority vendors are able to help us get through these rough patches. So there is plenty of opportunity for them. They just need to reach out to us and we will be happy to see what we can do for them.
Now, I have a question for Jean, piggybacking off of Maria and saying certification of those entities in those specified areas will be necessary. So how do you foresee that, Jean? Do you see people who may not have experience in those areas, but they have the ability or the capability to bring forth those resources to create or to complete this particular type of work? How do you foresee the certifying agencies being able to certify those companies as fast as possible, making sure that the NAICS codes are visible or in front of those entities to help them to understand what NAICS codes they need to use in order to get those specific certifications in those areas? Can you give us any information on that?
Sure. USDOT just released some recent guidance on NAICS codes, so I think that's important. Certainly, we're releasing some new guidance on interstate certification that should help things. And then, the NPRM, why I can't specifically talk to the exact proposals, but we always look for trying to increase accessibility for firms to participate in the program, and certainly remove those barriers that whether that's a personal net worth barrier or it's a certification barrier, or the interstate certification type of stuff. So we're always looking to improve the program to get more access to the disadvantaged business enterprises and the ACDBs as well.
Jean, is there more certification compliance reviews scheduled by FAA Civil Rights?
We are doing a combined review. I can't mention where at the moment, but with our sister operating administrations, FHWA and FTA, and the Departmental Office of Civil Rights, we're doing some combined reviews. So we, share everyone provides resources to make it easier. We're doing increased compliance reviews across the board. And then additional training, the community of practice training that some of you may have participated in from the airport perspective, or the recipient perspective, whether you're an FHWA or FTA recipient or FAA. But we're doing twice monthly trainings, to make it easier for either monitoring, or it's certification, or if it's whatever the topic may be, monitoring and good faith efforts. Those are the types of things we're working on right now with the airports.
So as a small business owner that may not understand what a compliance review basically means, can you, in very short and very brief, what does a compliance review mean for the owner of a small business?
Well, our compliance reviews are for, recipients of federal funds and certification entities. So we're making sure that they have all the, processes and procedures in place, for, monitoring and the contractual language for, just for the RFPs to make sure that when company, they put out construction RFPs that, there's disadvantaged business participation in that, and all the airport concession solicitations as well have that language that, requires, some type of good faith efforts towards meeting a goal.
Bob, when you were writing this, did you ever envision anything like this?
Well, I can guarantee we didn't think about electric vehicles, but no, I mean, the world we thought we were addressing has long since ceased to be the world that we see at airports, even if it was originally what we thought it was. And so, as several people have mentioned, one of the ongoing struggles is to adapt a regulatory framework and a statutory framework behind it that did not contemplate the way concessions in general and car rentals in particular work on airports today. And, it seems to require, people in the various industries involved in the department to come up with workarounds, or either that, and I'm guessing that the current NPRM does not go this far, consider restructuring the Part 23 rules at a larger scale to more closely fit the world we see in airports today. And I think that would be a tall order, but I think at some point, if we're going to do more than have workarounds, that's an important task for all the stakeholders and the department to take on, so that we don't have, a regulatory framework that's at odds with the reality on the ground.
Which is a good point, because I want to interject, and this is a tough question to the Renekart folks. Do we need more regulations, or is there not enough regulations in regards to how we increase opportunities for ACDB firms, or are we decreasing opportunities for ACDB firms?
Or just different regulations?
Thank you.
I don't know if it's a matter of adding regulations, but I think that some of the challenges are with the regulations being so different in the different markets. So, for example, if you have a supplier who operates in several different markets and they're trying to get certified in one market, well, they may be able to do that easily in one market, and they might have a few challenges in a different market just because it's different criteria. So I think a bit more of a streamline of approach to kind of get them to be all somewhat. I know everyone can't be the same, but to be more similar and to make it easier in that aspect, I think would help out a lot.
Now, Jean, can you speak to that at all in light of reciprocity?
Well, wait, before that, because I know Maria is over there itching. I know she wants to my practice session. So, and I said that specifically for Maria. So Maria, before we go to Jean, what do you think?
Oh, you're muted. Maria, you're muted.
I am muted. I'm sorry. I feel that we need to take airport concessions out of the equation. I feel that it should just be a certified DBE as it was many years ago, and that they need to be certified, but they also should be able to be utilized in other states without having to get the reciprocity, I never can say it right, to go to the other states. That is, especially in this day and age with everybody being so short-staffed, our smaller suppliers that are disadvantaged, that I have recognized when I'm looking at my contracts and introducing them to the ACDB program, they're too busy to go and get certified. I've identified them. They're way too busy. They are working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and now I want them to get certified. We need to make it a much simpler process, and we should make it easier for the rental companies that as long as it's a DBE supplier that we are utilizing, we would make our numbers. Okay, I think it would help. It would help us make our numbers. Having to be a CDBE and then having to go to different states, because I have a lot of smaller vendors, because of the short staffness that we have, they are and we're utilizing outsourcing, they're going to different states, but that takes time to get all of that.
I agree, Maria, wholeheartedly. These companies are small. They don't have a team of administrative people to manage 25 different licenses all over the country. And then you have things, we talked about staffing earlier, as we head into, it's not a secret that we're heading into the rental car busiest season, coming up on Memorial Day. We could use staff, everyone could use staff, and staffing agencies, if there was reciprocity, you could staff people in every state from one central location. No one's going on physical interviews in a lot of places, or they're just lining up candidates. You could do that remotely, but if you want to hire someone in, say, Florida versus California, Seattle, or wherever, you gotta have all these different certifications. So staffing in particular is one great example of where reciprocity could really help these businesses scale and grow their opportunities to be working with the rental car companies.
Yes.
Wow.
We're very well. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gene.
So I was going to say, certainly when the NPRM does hit the street, these are the types of comments that need to be submitted to the Federal Register, and so we encourage you to provide this feedback that I'm hearing today. Not that I haven't heard this one already, but yes, we understand that, and certainly want to hear from you when the NPRM comes out as well. Yes,
Yeah.
Bob.
Yeah. If I could just throw a thought in on top of what Gene said. The issue about reciprocity is a long-running one, and the balance is always between the interests and the convenience that members of the panel have spoken to versus the concern that the certification capabilities of different recipients is highly varied. And I can tell you from personal experience, the last few years I've worked as a contractor to the Department Office of Civil Rights on certification appeals, and the quality of the work from some certifiers is remarkably poor, others is really quite good. And the concern is always that, gee, if you have complete reciprocity, which has many advantages, then you will find companies, including somewhat sketchy companies, going to the easiest grader in the country and then being certified throughout the country without further review. So there's that balance, and it's always been a difficult one to maintain. I admit I'm leaning probably more these days toward, if not absolute national reciprocity, at least a degree of regional reciprocity that would be mandated. I mean, if I were in a position to comment on the rule, I might well say that. But the other thing that goes with this is there's been a long-running discussion about should particularly car rental goals, given that this is kind of a national market, be established on a national basis rather than on an airport by airport basis, because that's also an administrative convenience and effort issue that has been talked about, in my recollection, at least since 1995, and has never really gotten anywhere, but I continue to think is worthy of discussion.
I have to interject. Because we're going to get interrupted by Webmaster One. Renekart companies, really quick. How does a small business, how does an ACDB firm, how does a firm contact you to find out what the opportunities are locally or even nationally? Maria, go.
Well, we have a link that we submitted, so that way they could click on there and they can put their information. And then that way, when we do RFPs, we can invite them, like for janitorial, staffing or whatever, they can, we can send them an invitation for a bid. If they are interested, we do look at this and we get it to the right director of procurement, and that way we can see if we can bring them on if there's something that we are looking for.
Okay. Enterprise, go.
Yeah, we have a link on our website as well on enterprise.com. And if you go to the supplier link, then you can go and potential suppliers can click on a link and fill out a registration form that goes directly to me as a supplier diversity manager. And we can take a look at all the stuff they fill out to identify if they're targeting a local market or if they want to do business on a national scale and so on and so forth. Also, they can become members of AMAC, and we partner with you guys and other entities as well, and that's kind of the link that we use to as a resource to link up with suppliers as well.
Mike, go. Avis, budget.
So we've historically relied on the outreach days, right, and local on-site kind of recruiting efforts. You can also email me directly as the head of procurement. My name is on the webinar, but if you can't find it or misspell it, I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can reach me through there, and we'll be working to set up a portal link as well.
Who do we hold accountable if someone's not doing their job at the rental-car agencies? Since Gene Roth is holding a whole bunch of us accountable. So who do we hold accountable to the rental car companies? Maria, Dwayne, Mike, who do we hold?
Oh, go ahead.
No, I'll raise my hand. You can I'll be the one.
You go ahead. You go first. I was first.
No, I was saying I'll raise my hand to be held accountable.
Okay.
Or if anybody needs to contact us and they don't get through, I'm the guy.
Okay.
And I can be the guy also.
Yep, same for me.
Did you better? Oh, never mind. Great. Where's Webmaster One? Ebony, you have a couple of words for us as we get down to the closing of our program.
Yes, I just want to thank this esteemed panel and thank you and Yolanda for your leadership. This has been a great conversation. This is just, again, a continuation of the conversation, and I would encourage you all to learn more about AMAC at www.amac-org.com. Our events calendar will keep you up to date on important conversations like this, including OSDBU's training, which is on the calendar, so you can find out more information there, as well as our annual Business Diversity Conference coming up in Chicago, where we will have a ground transportation roundtable to talk about issues affecting the car rental industry. There'll be robust training and powerful networking with decision makers. And so please join us as we, at last but not least, and I think this is really important to say, Gina's talked about the notice of proposed rulemaking going on, or coming up, I should say. AMAC and our advocacy and our government affairs committee will be working to collect many of the comments and make sure that those are lifted as we respond back as a organization to represent all of our members, including the rental car industry. So if you haven't joined any committee and you have a lot to say, let's make sure we hear your voice through that committee. And again, thank you, Raymond and Yolanda, for moderating and leading this important discussion.
I got to give a special shout out to the islands of Hawaii that are going to get this a little bit later. They didn't want to get up this early in the morning. For them, it's kind of like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. So they'll be getting this on a tape delayed. I want to say thank you to my co-host, Yolanda Woodruff, out of Chicago, which is hosting AMAC.
June
20th through the 23rd. I also like to thank Webmaster One, Shermana Roundtree, for making this happen in the background, as well as our panelists, Bob Ashby, one of the co-writers of the regulations that we hold people accountable on. Shelby Scales, who's been around to see the changes from the Renekart as well as the construction, the DBE program happening and making it happen in her state of North Carolina, and now at OS Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization. I want to thank also Ebony Wimbush from AMAC for making this happen as a wonderful resource partner to this event. And finally, to our panelists, Dwayne Norris from Enterprise, Michael Robotasio from Avis Budget Group, as well as Maria Brooks from Hertz Renekart. Thank you very much.
Of course, yes, our FAA partner, Gene Roth, thank you so much for giving us the valuable insights that we all need to move forward. in the ACDBE and DBE arenas. Thank you so much.
And I thank my good partner, Yolanda Woodruff in Chicago. Thank you, folks.
Thank you. Thank you all
I'll
for
turn you
joining
over
us
to your
today.
local programs. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you.
day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. You still there, Yolanda? Hey, Ebony, how you doing?
Thank you, Ebony. Thank